So let me tell you a story before I get started with this devlog. I was planning on scheduling my previous devlog to go public on Friday at 12:30 p.m. I do this so I have time to work on the latest build Little Cherries tree in the morning and make sure everything works for the browser version, because the amount of people who play my game spikes once I upload a video. So I scheduled the devlog in the morning and didn't think anything of it. But when I went to sleep, I got a text from my girlfriend saying, "Hey, I don't know if you know this, but your video just went public." And I said, "Oh, what?" Well, it turns out instead of scheduling my video to upload on 12:30 p.m., I scheduled it for 12:30 a.m. At this point, I'm just rushing to upload the latest build on itch.io because I didn't want to make it private after I just made the video public. That shouldn't have been a problem because I tested it so many times in the debugger, right? Well, that's when I found out that there was a graphical bug in the browser version. I would find out the next day that it happened because I was using the GLES renderer, which causes some graphical errors to happen with the GUI. I would not have used this renderer if it wasn't recommended as the better renderer for the browser! God, I wish I had time to do this in the morning instead. Long story short, I'm now using a different renderer and the issue is fixed. Sorry about the little rant there, I just needed to get that off my chest. And I'm sorry for the massive tweet storm on Friday for anyone who's following me on Twitter. And I appreciate everyone who is understanding of that. But with that all being said, I finally finished Phase 2. And this time it should actually be on itch.io by the time you see this video. Unlike Phase 1, this actually took me a long time to get finished. I've been working on it on and off every other day, trying to balance working on Little Cherries tree and my summer classes. But that's only half the reason this video took so long to make. I was now starting to chart unfamiliar territories for me, learning new things that I tried to avoid up until now, reworking the player functions, and cutting ideas that would be replaced with others. I guess the shenanigans that happened last time was foreshadowing what was to come. Welcome to part 3 of the development of Little Cherries tree. When I was planning on what needed to get done for Phase 2, I originally had 10 things that needed to be done. And compared to Phase 1, these would be a lot more challenging to fix and add. Fortunately, for those who watched my previous devlog, know that I worked on some extra features for Phase 1 that I wasn't planning on working on till now, which bumped the things that needed to be done down to 7. Unlike last time, I decided to prioritize the things that required a good amount of coding first, so I could get the easy stuff done for last. Once I finished organizing, I began creating a new enemy for the game. I was having trouble thinking of what the third enemy should be. I first thought of having a squirrel that would throw nuts when the player was nearby, but that seemed too complex to code and I wasn't sure if I wanted the player to shoot the squirrel down or not. Then I thought, why not just have the nut come down from the sky? But that'd be pretty unfair because you couldn't see the nut coming down until it was on screen. Even with an indicator, I didn't know how it would work in practice. So after some brainstorming, I came up with the best enemy to add. A saw blade. The plan was to have the saw blade spin around in a circular motion and the player had to avoid it. And since it was an inanimate object, you couldn't shoot it down, which kind of made it a combination of the bird and the spike ball, where the saw blade would move around in a specific pattern like the bird, but was unable to be killed like the spike ball. As simple as this idea was, I had no idea how to implement it. Getting the sprite itself to rotate wasn't that hard to do, but getting the object to move around in a circular pattern was just something I couldn't comprehend to put into code. Even when looking at YouTube videos, I was just really confused on how this was being done. Regardless, I was still able to get the saw blade to spin around with this equation. What does this do exactly? I don't know, do I look like a mathematician to you? But it gets the job done, and that's truly what matters when it comes to programming. Getting things to work even though you have no idea what you're doing. Okay, that could have been worse. What do I have next? Oh. You see these two functions? Anyone who's taken 2 semesters of computer science probably know these simple functions. They're just read and write functions. Now tell me, how long do you think this took me to make? 10 minutes? Half an hour? Try 3 hours! It was getting so frustrating on how much I was spending time on this. At first the game would just crash, which I was expecting at first, but I spent way more time after that because I just couldn't find any of the files that I was trying to save. I swear, I reworked that code 10 times, checking to make sure everything worked as intended, making true or false statements, see if there were any files being created or being read. But no matter what I did, I just couldn't see it in the app data folder. But that's when I made the most idiotic discovery. I feel like an idiot right now. Oh, okay, hold on. I need to show this. Okay, so pretty much, when I used to make this game, I used to call it Cherry. So I assumed, oh, it's in the Cherry folder. And there was nothing here. I was like, what is going on? And I've been doing like multiple tests. But it turns out, when I exported the game, it's changed the entire project to Little Cherries tree. And look, here's the save file I just made and the one I was testing before that I thought didn't work. Once I had that spectacular revelation, I was able to successfully add data into the save file. I started by having the file save your settings, so you don't have to go into the settings every time you start the game. But saving your settings was only a test for what I really wanted to use it for. A high score system. I wanted to add this for a while, but I didn't know how to actually implement it. But after working on the save feature, I think I got a pretty good idea on how I wanted to store the data. After a game, you'll be shown your top 10 best scores depending on how much water you were using. So if you just finished a game with 4 drops of water, it'll show your top 10 best scores using 4 drops. But if you just finished a game with 7 drops, it'll show your top 10 best scores for using 7 drops. I didn't want to combine the data because getting a really high score with a lot of drops is a lot easier than using a small number of drops. So I divided the score based on the amount of drops you're using to make it feel a bit more fair. Getting all this to work probably took a whole night to implement due to needing to read the data and recreating it whenever you got a new high score, and creating the new UI. But I love the end result and I think it looks great. This was a lot more frustrating than I'm showing right now, however, I think it was well worth it. I was planning on creating a new mode for Little Cherry's tree. It would be exactly the same except you would be falling down instead of climbing up the tree. I thought it'd be a great idea in theory. Emphasis on in theory. When I was trying to implement this feature, I was having several problems. Most of them stemmed from trying to flip the level's boundaries. For me to explain this easily, here's what the level looks like outside the game. On the left and right there are walls that prevent the player and enemies from going off screen. And below that is a kill plane that destroys the player and all enemies. All these boundaries are moving up whenever the player is moving upwards. And although reversing the walls was fine, the kill plane just did not translate well when I was reversing its position. Because now the player could just get a game over for being too high up on the screen. And just removing the kill plane was not an easy solution because it was also used to despawn enemies, as said before. There were just a ton of issues that were stacking up on each other, making it extremely difficult for me to implement at the moment. So for right now, I'm canceling the feature until I can find a fix in the future. This was obviously really disappointing for me, because this would have been a big thing for the game. Coming to the reality that I had to, at best, delay this feature for the future was so frustrating to me, and it was reminding me of another time where I had to quit something because I just couldn't find any solutions to the problems I was having. But I really wanted to add something new to the game. Don't get me wrong, I still believe that the new enemy and save feature is huge for the game, but I really wanted to add one more big change that would make it its own beast, similar to how the water limit option was for the last build. Fortunately, when I was looking at my YouTube comments, there was a YouTuber by the name of Xander Wood who suggested adding different types of weapons that shoot water. First off, thanks for the comment, I appreciate it. And secondly, that was such a great idea that I'm honestly kind of mad that I didn't come up with it in the first place. And with this new fresh idea in my mind, I went straight to work. Not counting the watering can, I wanted to add 2 different types of weapons for the game. I first had to rework my player object by separating the watering can from the Little Cherry. This was done to change the watering can to whatever I wanted. Of course, this was only cosmetic for now, but I knew it wasn't going to be that case for very long. The first new weapon I added was a watering hose. Instead of tapping the spacebar to shoot 1 drop of water, you could just hold the button and shoot a lot of water. It's completely overpowered, but I'd be lying if I didn't say it was really fun to use. The second weapon I made was a soda can. This weapon would send you higher and much faster than the watering can. However, you don't shoot any projectiles, making it harder to hit certain platforms or shoot birds down. Out of all the things that are in Little Cherry's tree, this probably makes the least amount of sense, both in logic and the nature theme, but I really wanted a third weapon to be in the game. Plus, this is my game. I run this town. After I got these implemented, I was struggling to figure out how I wanted the player to activate these weapons. I didn't want to make it a separate option because that would mean I have to create 240 different scoreboards. And I was not going to mess with my save feature any more than I already have. So I came up with a different solution. For every 100 millimeters the player climbs, a crystal acorn will spawn with a line that goes across the screen. When the player touches it, they randomly get a different weapon. And I made sure you don't get the same weapon, so you're never stuck with the same weapon for the entire game. Even though some people may not like this solution, I think it's a good way to make the player use a variety of weapons without prioritizing on one of them. And despite these weapons playing differently, having their own pros and cons, their game plan is similar enough to not alienate players when they have to change weapons. Okay, we're at the home stretch, ladies and gentlemen. There's just 2 more things that I added. The first thing was adding new sound effects. The sound effects used to shoot down water are now different depending on the weapon you use, and there's a sound effect whenever you change weapons. And the final thing I did was add a new song for the options menu. I added this because when you start the game, there's no music, which is intentional, but this means whenever you're changing the settings for the music, you can't hear the difference until you start the game. So I whipped up this new song for the settings. I think it sounds fine for now, but I may change it later on. But with that, Phase 2 was finally done, after a week of trial and error and questioning my sanity. I'd be lying to myself if I said the amount of work I did for Phase 2 wasn't overwhelming. Trying these things that I've never done before was just really stressful for me. It's just so hard to see the same errors over and over. However, when I finally figured out the solution, after failing countless times, it really felt rewarding. When the pieces finally fit together, I feel like I just won the World Series. These small moments of joy and adrenaline are what keep me going, despite the work seeming impossible. But that's only half the reason. What really keeps me going after all the struggles for Little Cherry's Tree is really the support I get from you guys. Every like I get on social media, every positive comment I receive, and seeing the excitement that some people get when a new update is released makes every challenge I face worth it. I can't promise a masterpiece of game design, but I know I will put my 100% in this game to make sure Little Cherry's Tree is the best it can be, because you all deserve that. If you want to play the latest build of Little Cherry's Tree, the itch.io page will be in the description. You can play it on Windows, Mac, Linux, and the browser if you're using the PC. Which brings me to finally talk about the mobile ports. By the time this video is public, I'll be working extremely hard trying to port Little Cherry's Tree to Android. An iOS port will come in the future, but right now I want to prioritize on one mobile port. This is going to take much longer to work on, especially since I'm going to be away from home at this time. But I'll be making updates on Twitter, so if you haven't already, follow me in there so you could know the latest information on Little Cherry's Tree. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Any support is greatly appreciated. Got nothing else to say, so with that all being said, take care, comb your hair, and I'll see you guys later.